So thank you everyone that took the time to tweet your questions for this weekly Q&A video. I mean it. I appreciate it very much. The fact that some of you care makes me emotional. Care. Anyways, let's go ahead and see how many of these questions we can get through. Vinny Lospinuso kicks us off by asking, do you see Josh Rosen in a Dolphins uniform next year? The short answer is no. I'd be really surprised if he was, which kind of, again, just brings up the whole thing. Why bother trading for him to begin with? I don't know. And then the starting of Fitzpatrick, and you're still not winning games. Like, this defeats the whole purpose of a tank. Like, if anything, if you're truly trying to tank and you think Rosen is worse, then Rosen should be your guy. And if you think Rosen actually has some capability and potential to develop into that dude, which you would think would have been part of the reason you traded for him to begin with, then you would think you would really want to play him and figure out what you have. Or maybe they found out what Arizona found out is that he's not that dude. And you know why? Because he's not that dude. So no, I don't personally see him in a Dolphins uniform next year. The Dolphins are either tanking for Tua or they're blowing for Burrow. One of those two. Keys 10 asks, Mitchell Trubisky or Baker Mayfield? Man, you talk about having to choose between two lame-ass options. Lame-ass options. I will still go Baker Mayfield because I think he has more talent as a passer. I think he has more confidence, more swag about him. Not like it matters a whole hell of a lot of beans right now, does it? But Trubisky's a shattered dude, and he doesn't have that upside as a passer that Mayfield does. So I still have to go Baker the bust over Trubisky the terrible. Storm asks, does Vic Beasley get traded at all with that contract? For what? Like, who's going to want him? What role is he going to play? Is he really worth the money that he's getting paid? I'm sure Atlanta will be trying to deal him, but I don't know that anybody would want him, but crazier things have happened. Stephen Hilton asks, with how badly Antonio Brown has ruined his reputation, if he never plays again, could he still get into Canton? He could, but I don't know if it's that likely. Like, really what Antonio Brown needs right now, and I mean this seriously, if he wants to cement his place in Canton, is 2 to 3 years in the league where he behaves in the locker room and team environment and setting, even if his numbers aren't as good. Even if he's hovering around 800 to 1,000 receiving yards, maybe 60 to 80 receptions, that would do more for him at this point to cement his legacy than going somewhere else, putting up 2 or 3 years of big numbers and being the same pain in the ass that he was the last few years in Pittsburgh. So right now, no, I wouldn't feel good about it because you could say, well, Terrell Owens got in. You could also say that Terrell Owens had even more years of high-level production than Antonio Brown did. Maybe down the road, when you talk about Antonio Brown was one of the best at his position for a decade, that would hopefully trump the day at some point. But, man, I don't know if I feel that good about it right now. I really don't. Space Godzilla, how do you feel about Kyler Murray and Kliff Kingsbury so far? Well, you look at that team, they're, 3-3-1. Their number one overall pick quarterback doesn't look like a total bust, at least at this time. I don't know if I'm a believer in Kingsbury. I think he's kind of dopey maybe, but maybe dopey can work. But encouraged so far with what I'm seeing. At least if you're the Cardinals organization, you're the Cardinals fan base at this point, you have a reason for hope. And sometimes hope matters. You have hope. You have something to look forward to in the future. In Christ, the way things are going right now, you're potentially in the mix for a playoff spot. I don't expect you to stay there, but at least you could say, hey, the unproven head coach who got fired from his college job, didn't totally bust out year one, the quarterback that we took number one overall the year after trading up from 15 to 10 to get another quarterback in Rosen that we've already traded away for Andy Isabella, you could then sit there and say, Kyler Murray doesn't look like a total bust. You have something to believe in. You have something to build on positively for the future. Chris Valde, do the refs love to screw the Lions, or is it just an example of Detroit being Detroit? When you watch that Green Bay game, man, it's really easy to make that argument for the first one, but I think that's more due to just sheer incompetence than it is bias. But really hard to make an argument against it, like objectively when you look at it. Like you could look at that and say, man, it really feels like the deck is stacked against Detroit. And in other cases, it's just the Lions being the Lions. That's what it is. George Infulia, Any chance Marcus Mariota could still be a franchise quarterback if he goes to a team with a good offensive coordinator that knows how to use him? I wouldn't bet on it at this point. The dude's had 5 years. And sure, sometimes you can have reclamation projects and dudes can far surpass with their second or third teams what they do with their first team. It happens, but I wouldn't be betting any money on it. Excuse me, I said Trubisky, what the fuck's the difference? But look at Mariota. There's another guy whose confidence is shattered. Sure, his organization didn't do him a lot of help by sitting there and building that offense the way that they did. At some point in time, you got to be able to stay healthy, which he wasn't able to do. I really feel like maybe he lost that team last year when he didn't play in Week 17 against the Colts. Like, once he lost the team, maybe that was the end for him. So, no, I don't see it. And then also, Georgian Fulia asks, why is no one talking about the job Frank Reich is doing? I don't know. It feels like some people do. Like last year, I didn't think Nagy was the coach of the year. I thought Frank Reich was the coach of the year, or Pete Carroll was the coach of the year. Because I thought their pure coaching jobs were better. Where the Bears had spent a bunch of money in the offseason, made the big trade for Khalil Mack, and their success primarily rode on their defense. Felt weird to give, even though his team went 12-4 and won the division, it felt weird to give the offensive-minded guy Matt Nagy the credit as coach of the year. Frank Reich, though, and you see the work that he did with Andrew Luck and the limited overall talent that they had on that team on both sides of the ball. Sure, they have Darius Leonard and Quentin Nelson from that draft class, and you still have T.Y. Hilton, you still have Andrew Luck, Jack Doyle had a great year last year. Eric Ebron had a great year last year. You look at stuff like Ebron, who was in Detroit, a disappointment, goes to the Colts, and all of a sudden he's a dude. Like, that points to coaching. That points to Frank Reich. And the dude is a hell of a coach. And the Colts organization has to be thankful every day that they didn't get saddled themselves with Josh McDaniel. And sure, that wasn't their choice because that was their guy. Sometimes the second option ends up being just all right. Drake Maddox, 28. Team fit for Marcus Mariota if the Titans move on. Well, seeing as how every time they need a quarterback, they go down the veteran path, it feels like. The Denver Broncos, John Elway, I think could definitely be a player for Mariota. The Bears, if Mark Helfrich is still going to be the offensive coordinator, I think certainly are going to be a player because they got to bring in some type of competition for Trubisky because he's terrible. He sucks. I think there will be other teams that are definitely going to be in the market. Trying to think through some now. Maybe the Bengals. There are other teams that you could think through and you could say, maybe potentially the Buccaneers. How interesting would that be? Have Winston replaced by Mariota. It probably wouldn't happen, but still, it'd be ironic and funny. Morton Karsten asks, if Trubisky was black, would he be considered an all-time bust? Where does the racial element come into this one with Trubisky? I'm puzzled. Because Jamarcus Russell was an all-time bust, not because he was black, but because he was booty. Ryan Leaf was a white guy at quarterback, all-time bust. He was pasty as hell. Todd Marinovich, going way back in the day, was a massive bust. He was a whitey. Achilles Smith, yes, he was black. I don't sit there and say that a guy is viewed more as a bust because he's white or black. I just don't get where this question is going. Trubisky is going to be considered an all-time bust because guys like Mahomes and Watson were taken after him and they're vastly superior in so many different ways. The one biracial guy and the other black guy were clearly better than the whitey. I mean, that's just the way it is. So no, I don't say that. Like, I would make a stronger argument that if Baker Mayfield was black, that we might have a different conversation going on nationally about him. That I could maybe make an argument. Trubisky's never really done enough to ever get people to really think that he was that dude, unless you have delusional Bears fans that wanted to pretend and believe that he was, but he never was. But now that shouldn't have anything to do with it. I could see it with Mayfield because he's gotten so much more media attention. Then I could potentially see it. Trubisky just hasn't been that exposed to the media, so it's not going to care or matter whether he's white or black. He's just going to be an all-time bust because he sucks, period. Dakota Harper, should the Bears trade for Derek Carr or sign Marcus Mariota? Where are you going with Derek Carr? And sign Marcus Mariota for what? You already drafted a guy number 2 overall, and he sucks. So you're going to bring in another former number 2 overall pick? That also sucks? Man, let's just keep it real here. West Coast 57-257. Grade John Lynch's job as general manager just thus far. Well, now that we're, 3 years in and the 49ers are undefeated, of course you would ask that question at this time. A very timely and appropriate question for you because you're going to assume that I'm going to grade him highly. Well, after year 3, you're finally seeing something. If we're being honest, we can talk about Jimmy G, and I'm going to come back to it. Is Jimmy G really that guy? A lot of it's going to come down to that. And when we talk about the Bears and passing on Mahomes and Watson, and we forget that the Browns did that both at the number 1 overall pick, and then at pick 12, they still had a chance to take Deshaun Watson, and they traded out of that pick for future draft pick capital because it was stupid. You look at the 49ers and you say, instead of taking Mahomes or Watson at number 2 overall, they passed, traded down, took Solomon Thomas, and then mid-season that year traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. Was that really the best thing? How much better would this team be if they had taken Mahomes or Watson number 2 overall instead of taking Solomon Thomas, taking those additional picks, and da-da-da-da? You could also say, the acquiring of additional picks is great, but wasn't it the 49ers that traded away an early 3rd-round pick to the Saints, who then drafted Alvin Kamara? You know what I mean? Like, obviously, that defensive front is great with guys like DeForest Buckner and by the way, not a John Lynch draft pick, correct? You look at his draft picks, the 2 that he had in 2017, Solomon Thomas, disappointing me, has been a total bust. And obviously, Reuben Foster ended up being a total bust for them. Still uncertain about Jimmy G. He made the right head coaching hire, obviously, I think, in Kyle Shanahan. And the defensive front is really good. So, at this moment, I would grade him a C+. I'm just going to overreact to how the team is performing based off of a few weeks. That, if anything, has elevated the draft grade. If he goes out and makes a trade for somebody like A.J. Green or something in another week or 2, then that bumps the draft grade up a little bit. It really does. Kieran Chase asks, why do you think people make excuses for Baker's poor play but pounce on Lamar if he has a bad game even though he's been way better? And let's make it clear, Lamar has been way better. It's because Lamar got saddled with certain stigmas that we know what the hell they're related to. Don't deny them because you know they're fucking true. Oh, he's a running back. He's a wide receiver. Well, I can tell you this much right now. He sure as hell looks a lot more like an NFL franchise quarterback than freaking Baker Mayfield does. That, Kieran, if you want to go down a racial path or play a little bit of a racial element, it's there with those 2 guys, especially because of the media attention that Baker Mayfield got during his rookie season and after his rookie season. A lot of companies and so forth have a lot invested in Baker Mayfield. The NFL has a lot invested in Baker Mayfield. So from a business standpoint, it's not very good for them to openly talk about him being a bust so far or being really bad this year, because he has been really bad this year. You have to be blind to not be able to see that. They don't have the same skin in the game, so to speak, when it comes to Lamar. So it's a little easier to pounce every time you feel like he has a disappointing or subpar game, even though they've been few and far between. So there's some racial component to it, yes. Is that the only thing? Hell no. It has more to do with investments made in Mayfield versus Jackson, and as a result, not wanting to negate the investment made in Mayfield. Great question. Jando Cruz, which team in any way do you see needing a new coach next year? A lot of them. A lot of them. I'm not going to go through them all now. There's going to be a lot of them. Jesse, does C-Mac have a legit shot at MVP, and should a running back be considered? I think if they're that valuable to the team, absolutely. And I think Christian McCaffrey certainly is a contender. In your opinion on Terry McLaurin coming out of Ohio State, I'm not surprised in any way. Learn the lesson of underrating Michael Thomas. And when I looked at McLaurin, I saw a second-round pick. I saw a guy that I wasn't be surprised if he was going to come in as a rookie and be one of the best 2 or 3 rookie wide receivers. You can see the route running, you can see the speed, you can see the separation skills. You could see it. Just because Urban Meyer didn't know how the hell to use him at Ohio State doesn't mean that this dude wasn't going to be good, so I'm not surprised at all. Michael Strickland, will the Bears re-sign Tariq Cohen with having to pay Jackson? Christ, the way both of these guys have played up to now this year, why would we even worry about paying either one of them? I know it feels like a bit of an overreaction on Eddie Jackson, but, I mean, real talk, like, what has he done? Nothing. As far as Tariq Cohen, I can't imagine another year and a half down the road after he's through 4 seasons, them wanting to pay him big money. I just can't see it. Chet Spooky Laser. Is Mahomes versus Watson the next Brady versus Manning? I think it could potentially be, yes. Makes it even more intriguing because they were the same draft class. They were both, first-round picks. Like, I think it has a chance to be that for the league. I really do. Darren Faust, how long will Miami's rebuild take? Interesting question. Just because they're peeling off a bunch of people and getting a bunch of picks doesn't mean that they're going to use them right or they're going to have any idea what the hell to do with them. So I really don't know. You could say, if you do it right, in year 2 of the rebuild, you can make the playoffs, and that certainly is possible. Or you could be in a perpetual state of rebuilding for the next decade plus to come. Josh Grantham, who do you think is the Titans quarterback in 2020? I don't think they're on the current roster. I'd be stunned if it's either Mariota or Tannehill. I'd be stunned. And Shad, any potential Hall of Famers from the 2017 draft class? That's the last question in this Q&A. Surely think there are, yes. Like the number 1 overall pick, Myles Garrett, sure seems to be staring down the barrel of a Hall of Fame career. Clearly looks like that. I could definitely say Mahomes, Watson are both guys that you're looking at and you're seeing potentially Hall of Fame type potential there. A couple of the running backs maybe, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara. And I know I'm leaving guys off the list. Like this 2017 draft class was actually really good. So I'm leaving guys off. But those are the first few notable ones that kind of jump out to me. Dalvin Cook, if he can stay healthy for the next several years, I think is better potentially than both McCaffrey and Kamara. And I graded him as such in the 2017 draft. So I look at that draft class and there's a potential for several Hall of Famers. There most certainly is. There most certainly is. Going to be some notable bust. There most certainly are some guys that have real Hall of Fame potential to them. I truly believe that. Jamal Adams, pick 6, I think, is another guy that you look at, possibly has Hall of Fame potential to him. So it was a really good draft class. I leave it to my Bears to screw up and take the wrong quarterback.